In this video, I want to talk to you about router tables. It's kind of an accessory for routers, so a table is not really a power tool exactly, but a router table can really expand the usefulness of routers a lot. I'm not going to go into exactly how you're going to do that because the topic is above the beginner's level. But as a beginner, I think you should know what router tables are, have a sense of what they do, see the two main kinds, the floor model and the benchtop model. And I really just want to show you what they do and how they work and offer some suggestions that I think will help you as you're deciding to increase your tool capacity and maybe add a router table to the deal as well. So this isn't primarily a topic about routers. This is a topic about router tables. And a router table is a stationary object of some kind, and a router is mounted upside down under the table. So I've got a router in this particular table right here, and let's just see here. I've got a router bit here too that just put in there so that you get a sense of where it goes. But here's the router table. So here's the router that fits in the table. You'll notice that this base plate is not the usual base plate that you'd use with a handheld router. As you can imagine, the base plate, when you're going to be using a router in a table, needs to stick out farther than the router so that the router can hang from this thing here. Base plate or a router table insert is what this is called. In practice, I actually find that I have some pretty good luck doing handheld routing with this big base plate on. As I said, normally the base plate is just the same diameter as this metal part you see here. But the big size can be very helpful when you're routing by hand sometimes when you need a little bit more stability. And so this isn't fastened in here. It just kind of sits in there. It works fine. It doesn't need to be fastened, but it does need to be flush so that when the bit's in place and you're sliding wood across this bit as it spins, that wood's not going to catch on any sort of notches and ledges there. This is what you call a fence. And in woodworking, a fence is something that's usually locked in place, in this case on the router table, but you also have fences on table saws. It locks in place and it provides a surface to slide the wood across. Some router bits that you'd use in a table have a bearing on top. And if you remember from earlier in the course, the purpose of the bearing is to ride along the edge of a piece of wood and guide it. Now sometimes though, our piece of wood isn't high enough to touch the bearing. So in that case, I would use a fence, something like this. This table is a manufactured product, or at least it started as a manufactured product. I've adjusted it a bit and modified it for several very good reasons here in my shop, and I'll tell you about those in a second. This is a fence. It's an aftermarket fence, and it's quite a good one. I really like it. It's got these things here. These are called feather boards. A feather board has these springy fingers on it, and the purpose of the fingers is to hold the wood down tight to the table while it's sliding past the bit. So the whole thing's completely adjustable. In this particular fence, there's a switch here too. So your router plugs into the switch circuit, and then the switch circuit plugs into your power outlet. So you can control your router. You can turn it on and off without having to reach down. You get sort of tabletop control, essentially. Router table fences aren't always things that you buy, or at least partially buy. You can make one yourself too, and that's what I've got here. You can't buy a fence like this. This is specially designed for milling crown molding. So if you want to make your own crown molding, you'd use a bit something like this that I have in here. And because crown molding is wide, you need a tall fence. And in this case, the fence needs to be exceptionally tall to leave room for these feather boards, because the wood will be coming in on its edge here. We're routing the face of the board when we're making crown molding. So the feather board will hold that wood down tight to the top as it slides along. And then this feather board actually holds the wood against the fence. And then, just to be sure, I've got another feather board here that makes sure this end of the board stays down. So the fence here is actually built around a manufactured starting point. Freud is a name in woodworking that you're going to hear a fair amount of. Their claim to fame is router bits and saw blades, and they do a very good job at those things. And they also sell this metal part here, which is the basis of the fence that I built. And normally this fence would bolt down to the tabletop, but I've got it clamped down with these brackets here. So just something for you to think about, and to help you realize that part of your success as a woodworker when you start to get more advanced is the ability to make some of your own tools or setups like this, because the creativity that you're applying to your projects can also apply to your workshop and your tooling and how you make things happen. That approach has really helped me a lot over the years, and it can help you too. A benchtop model makes a lot of sense for if you have a small workspace. You can do just as good work, maybe not quite as easily, because the surface of the table here isn't as large as the other one. And so if you're working with large pieces of wood, a benchtop model might not be quite as handy. But if you have limited space, I would definitely consider one of these. The cabinet, the router sits underneath, a router maybe like this. One thing I like to do, over the years I've accumulated more than one router, and sometimes I just leave the different base plates attached to the router. So instead of having to unscrew the router from the base plate, I can just lift one out, put another one in, save some time that way. I said before that I modified this floor model, and I did that in a few ways. First of all, it didn't have any wheels when I bought it. It was really just this red thing, the red frame and the router tabletop. That's how it came. I added these shelves, and I put the whole thing on this rolling base, and the height of the base is such that the height of the router table is exactly the same as the height of my table saw, which means that when I'm not using this router table for routing, it acts as a really good outfeed table. So an outfeed table is something that's going to support a long piece of wood as it slides over a table saw. So I precisely, or on purpose, adjusted the height of this. I ended up having to cut some metal off the legs and things, but it's definitely a good modification. Now, underneath, I added a shelf, as you can see, and I've got some routers stored there and some other accessories in these containers. I don't know if you've noticed by now, but I'm a pretty big fan of organization, and that's because there are so many bits and pieces and moving parts and things when it comes to woodworking. You wouldn't experience that yet as a beginner, but as you expand your tool collection, that's going to be something that you run into a lot. The need to organize your bits and pieces is crucial. Now there is a router table design that's neither of these things here. It's a very simple design that I used for many years. I used a Workmate, which is a folding work platform. Black & Decker makes it. They still make them. And then I made a router table top that just fits on top. It's gripped by the top of the Workmate. And the nice thing is, besides being inexpensive, it folds up and puts away really quite compactly. which is another option for you to use if you have a small space. Later in this lesson, you'll be able to download plans and construction instructions for making your own one of those portable workmate router table things. So one of the challenges I have is that I don't really know, I can't know what you are particularly interested in. So once we're into router tables, we're starting to get fairly advanced. So don't hesitate to contact me if you've got questions. I can only answer so many questions from my imagination here. So contact me if you say, what do you think of that router table, Steve? Or, do I really need a router table? Can I get away without it? Questions like that. Those are the kinds of things that I can answer directly. So let me know how I can help.